Women in Aviation. Informational text by Patricia and Frederick McKissick. Background: in the early 1900s, flying in aeroplanes, fixed-wing self-propelled flying machines, was a bold undertaking. Male pilots were dashing heroes. However, female aviators, especially African American women, had to struggle for acceptance. Patricia and Frederick McKissick have written over 100 biographies and nonfiction books, most focusing on the achievements of African Americans. American aviation was from its very beginnings marred with sexist and racist assumptions. It was taken for granted that women were generally inferior to men, and that white men were superior to all others. Flying, it was said, required a level of skill and courage that women and blacks lacked. Yet despite these prevailing prejudices, the dream and the desire to fly stayed alive among women and African Americans. The story of women in aviation actually goes back to the time of the hot air balloons. A number of women in Europe and America gained fame for their skill and daring. Sophie Blanchard made her first solo balloon flight in 1805. She grew in fame and was eventually named official aeronaut of the empire by Napoleon. By 1834, at least 20 women in Europe were piloting their own balloons. Though she did not fly, Catherine Wright was a major supporter of her brother's efforts. Orville so appreciated his sister's help that he said, "When the world speaks of the Wrights, it must include my sister. She inspired much of our effort." Although Raymond de la Roche of France was the first woman in the world to earn her pilot's license, Harriet Quimby held the distinction of being the first American woman to become a licensed pilot. On August 1, 1911, Quimby, who was described as a real beauty with haunting blue-green eyes, strolled off the field after passing her pilot's test easily. To the male reporters who inundated her with questions, Quimby fired back answers with self-confidence. Walking past a group of women who had come to witness the historic event, Quimby was overheard to quip with a smile and a wink, "Flying is easier than voting." The women's suffrage amendment wasn't passed until 1920. As difficult as it was for women to become pilots in significant numbers, it was doubly hard for African Americans, especially black women. That's why Bessie Coleman, the first African American to earn her pilot's license, is such an exciting and important figure in aviation. Bessie Coleman was born in 1893 in Atlanta, Texas, the 12th of 13 children. Her mother, who had been a slave, valued education and encouraged all of her children to attend school in order to better themselves. The encouragement paid off because Coleman graduated from high school, a feat not too many black women were able to accomplish in the early 1900s. Bessie Coleman refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on her. She attended an Oklahoma college for one semester but ran out of money. Accepting the offer of one of her brothers to come live with him and his family in Chicago, Coleman found a job as a manicurist. She fully intended to return to school after saving enough money, but she never did. While in Chicago, she learned about flying and made a new set of goals for herself. She wanted to be a pilot. Coleman learned about flying from reading newspaper accounts of air battles during World War I. She tried to find a school that would accept her as a trainee, but no American instructor or flying school was willing to teach her. When the war ended, a friend, Robert S. Abbott, the founder of the Chicago Defender, one of the most popular black-owned and operated newspapers in the country, suggested that Coleman go to France, where racial prejudice was not as restrictive as it was in America. Even though the United States was the birthplace of flight, it was slower than other countries to develop an organized aviation program. European leaders immediately saw the commercial and military advantages of a strong national aviation program. Bessie knew from her reading that both French and German aircraft were among the best in the world. Coleman had also read about Eugene Jacques Ballard, the well-decorated and highly honored native of Georgia who had become the first African American to fly an airplane in combat as a member of the French Lafayette Flying Corps during World War I. Other blacks had gone to Europe to get their training too. Coleman realized that if she were ever going to get a chance to fly, she too would have to go to France. But she didn't have any money to get there, and besides, she couldn't speak a word of French.